I don't like it. I
And
don't
do you
like this
think-
cheap.
Do you think I'm finding that, you know, as much as the other, like the Japanese or whoever's now coming into this scene bigger and bigger, unfortunately, this is what they're seeing, so they're taking their cues from this, whereas maybe our generation took our cues from Suherazaki. The new generation, like my students, I may teach them, don't do this, but then they come
That's
back
all
to me and
they
they say,
see.
that's all they see, exactly. And so they try to emulate it, and it's like, well, what's the point of the art form then? There is no art left anymore.
Well, you know, I had a girl, you know, because I worked in nightclubs, and of course the Arab customers always really thought I was hot. And you know, these girls that would come in and hang around to pick up the Arab guys, and she asked me, she says, did you learn to belly dance to attract Arabs? And I told her, I said, honey, why should I go to all that work to attract Arabs? All I have to do is sit on a bar stool. You know, it's like, why bother? Why don't you just all sit on a bar stool and let us get on with the art? The problem with it is that it's submerging the true the true thing that is contained in this art form. It's covering it with shit. So that what it really is being killed because they say, oh, they're just sluts. And there's no standards, and these people don't even know anything about how to produce the movement. It's just all in how sexy you can be, how much attention, how many men are after you, or who you're screwing. And the whole thing, the actual reason that it's existed for all these thousands of years is covered. And nobody can even see it. People say, oh, belly dancing. Like I'm watching So You Think You Can Dance, and they had some horrible little gal who wiggles around in a belly dance suit, and they says, oh, a belly dancer, wow, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just sitting there watching her kick her feet out, and she doesn't freaking know anything. Oh, I'm Middle Eastern, she says. And I'm just humiliated.
Yeah.
For two reasons. First of all, the reaction is, oh, wow, that's sexy, ooh. And the absolute no skill, nothing. And she's belly dancing to save her life, and I'm looking at her and I'm going, somebody shoot her on the stage, because she has no idea to even how to belly dance. The first year I was belly dancing, and that's what I did. But I had vicious trainers. They didn't let us get away with anything. It's like, you better have that down next week, you know, when I studied. But these days, it's so disrespected. And it's one of the most difficult dance forms that exists.
Yeah.
If you really go into how the technique is generated, and what there is to it, and how many layers you can put on it. I studied with Yasmina Ramzy, and one thing that I loved about her so much was the way that she tore everything apart, right down to where the breath came from, and how absolutely nitpicky she was about every little step of it. Okay, do this. Okay, you're doing that. Okay, now add this. Blah, 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 blah. And forcing you to tear the whole thing apart and understand it from the ground up, from where your breath comes from, everything like that. And I got so fascinated by how the technique is generated and what there is to it. And then I got a hold of a couple of ballet dancers. And I always dreamed to be a ballerina when I was a kid, but we lived too far away from a ballet school, and my parents didn't have the money, so I was never trained. And I should have been a ballerina. I wasn't. And I got a hold of these ballerinas, and I said, we're going to make Egyptian technique on point. And we did.
And what year was that?
I had two girls. One girl's name is Jindra Payne, and we worked with her in 1990. 2, 3, 4, and she was my first point Oriental dancer. And then Sabah Saeed from Superstars of Belly Dance, and she was here going to Cairo University, American University in Cairo, and one of the other foreign teachers who lived around me had gotten her to come in, and she was taking classes. Professional dance students now. You know, I'm used to them from Los Angeles because the caliber there is very high. You get people with dance majors, they're coming in, they want to know, you know? So they didn't know what to do with her. They show her choreography, she goes, got it, you know, and they went, well, sure, I can't do anything with her. Here, Hallah. Now, mind you, they would never give me a student, but since they couldn't handle her, they handed her to me. And it was like getting a diamond. I went, so you're a ballerina, huh? Would you like to learn to belly dance on point? And that girl, she was a prima ballerina. And, you know, she strapped those shoes on. There they are. And stood up on her toes and lived the rest of her life on her toes. The other girl could go up on her toes, but it was really hard for her, you know. But this girl, boom, 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 she was just, boom, boom. So then we started. And so she studied with me while she was here, and we did a bunch of crazy stuff. And then she went back to America. She finished her college, and her dream, as she told me that years ago, was her dream was to be a belly dance superstar. And she said that to me, and I said, well, I know those people. I trained their main dancer, because Jelena was my student. You know, when she started belly dancing, you know, all those years ago. Isam Hoshan worked in the club that we ran. I knew them, you know, Miles Copeland, of course, who knows Miles Copeland, but anyway, and I told her, I said, I know those people, you want to do that? Okay. I said, well, I know that guy, he always wants something crazy. So we'll do the point piece. So we choreographed this piece to an Karsum song, and because I don't know anything about ballet, and she was very well trained, you know, it was kind of a collaboration because she knew, you know, I'd say, well, what's that called? Well, I don't know, you know, because I've seen it, but I don't know what it is. I'd say, well, you can shimmy while you do that, right? And she goes, no, you can't do that because blah, 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 blah. And I said, so, well, I'm sure you can. Just, you know, and we started to use this technique where you're raising everything up and inflating the lungs so that the rib cage floats and there's no weight in the feet, this kind of stuff. And she was able, and I kept telling her, she said, you can't do it. I said, yes, you can, just try. And she would try, and she would do just a time. I said, see, you're doing it, you're doing it, you're doing it, you can do it, you can do it. So when she, because I didn't know that you can't do that, we were able to design a technique that never existed. And her master ballet teachers, when they saw it, she took it back and performed it for them. They said, oh my God, how did you do that? How are you out of your shoes like that? What is this? Because, you know, they're all hyperextended and with the technique with the lift and the tuck, pulling all the way out, it made her so light on her feet. And they said that I had created a new dance style. Of course, I'm stuck over here. I never got to develop it more than that. And she was injured. Miles Copeland had her. He tried to film it, and he had her dance for 4 hours for a film on concrete, and she broke her feet. She's done. And I never got another ballerina, but it's there. You know,
that's great.
I did choreography that you can see. It's with, what was that? Academy of Middle Eastern Dance, Susie Evans. Do you ever remember
I heard
her?
the name.
Yeah, the third show that she did, there's a choreography that the first girl did. That was a Oriental opening and a drum solo on point that I did. Very interesting. You might like that. It's interesting. because everybody I've ever talked to says there's no way that you can do it. That it's sort of a, you know, with a bit of Oriental styling, but we were doing heavy technique, pistons and full shimmies, and, you know, of course arabesque, all that stuff, because it comes from that, but the real Egyptian technique, the heavy technique, on point, it can be done.
Well,
Interesting.
I believe you.
We did some with some of the clients where I had a dancer that was a very well-recognized flamenco dancer that worked in El Cid in Los Angeles, and she was a belly dancing student, and we choreographed for her for the nightclub that we were doing. It was Hollywood Park Casino, which is a big racetrack, and we had a show in there. And we did flamenco routines with castanets instead of sagat, and fused that stuff, and that was, you know, 1994, this kind of stuff. It's interesting. You know, and of course, like I said, I'm trained as a belly dancer. I've had great teachers, but I have no other dance training I never got to take. I took one class to learn how to turn from the ballerina, and that was it, because I gotta know that, right? But I'm endlessly fascinated by it. But I found that in this day and age, to get anybody to listen to you is impossible, and they just look at you like, who the fuck do you think you are? You don't know anything. And I don't talk about it anymore. I don't offer myself because I got so tired of being shut down. I know a lot of stuff. I had some insane teachers that are gone and nobody ever heard of them again, and I know a whole bunch of stuff, but nobody is interested.
Is there anything else you want to say in general, or we just do your costumes now?
Anything I want to say in general?
I think you said a lot of fascinating things.
What I want to say is good for you. Really glad to meet you. Really nice to meet somebody that has room in their soul for somebody else's story. We don't find that.
No, this...
We don't find that.
And we need it in this art form, because in the future, I believe it will be a valuable art form, and people will want to get some history, and it's not going to be there.
Well, you know, basically, there's a little tiny group of people from years ago who heard of me. I was a big teacher. But as soon as they could forget me, they did, because I was a big competition for all of them. And I know where all the bodies are buried. I started some of the people who are world famous now. You know, I got them when they came to me with the Cain and the Debki song.
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, no, I have nothing else to say except thank you.
Okay.